Welcome to week 8 of Explore the Bible. We're continuing in the book of Genesis, the story of Jacob. I think we're actually going to finish our part of the story of Jacob today, really, where he's the main character, at least. So this week will kind of be the last one for Jacob being the main character. But good passage today, some reassurance and reaffirming that we'll see in it. Before we dive into Genesis 35, be sure and subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the little subscribe button. Like, appreciate it if you'll hit thumbs up. Comment if you've got a question, put it in there. Tell us where you're watching from. And then be sure and share the video with somebody else. It really helps us when you share the video on social media or wherever. Just send them a link. That just helps us when you do that. All right? Appreciate it. If you want to support what we're doing, go right here to give.exposedtochrist.com and you can support our ministry. Let's look at Genesis 35. God said to Jacob, "Get up, go to Bethel and settle there. Build an altar there to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau." So Jacob said to his family and all who were with him, "Get rid of the foreign gods that are among you. Purify yourselves and change your clothes. We must get up and go to Bethel. I will build an altar there to the God who answered me in my day of distress. He has been with me everywhere I have gone." Okay, this is Genesis 28, right? Remember that? We did this study several weeks ago, but you might go back and read that story again about what happens there. It'll be helpful to you. So God says to Jacob, you need to get up and you need to go to Bethel and settle there. That's where you need to make your home, in that area, right? So, and when you get there, build an altar, right? So, because what happened is the Lord appeared to him there when he was on his way leaving, trying to get away from Esau. Right, so he's leaving, and then God appears to him and renews a covenant with him, specifically covenant with Jacob, and this is what starts Jacob's turn back towards the Lord. Okay, and so he's telling him, you need to go back to that place. And when it happened, he had put a rock and poured oil on it, to mark the spot. And there was a town there called Luz, and L-U-Z, Luz, maybe not lose like loser, but L-U-Z. So Jacob tells his family, hey, get everything, right? Purify yourselves, get rid of your foreign gods, purify yourselves, change your clothes. Interesting, there's some Pauline thing in there, I think, maybe, if we think about Paul and get put off and put on kind of stuff, right? We're going to Bethel, right? He says, I'm going to build an altar there to the God who answered me in my day of distress. This was a seminal event in his life, and the Lord has told him to go back to that place. Have you ever had a place where just being in that place reminded you of the presence of God, where God had really worked in your life, spoken to you? Maybe it was a campground, a youth camp or something like that you'd been, or a college, something, I don't know, wherever, where you'd been, where you sensed the presence of the Lord, a special place for you. Well, that's what this was for him. Now, there's not any kind of application in here about go back to that special place, but that was what he was telling Jacob to do, right? So then they gave Jacob all their foreign gods and their earrings, and Jacob hid them under the oak near Shechem, so they couldn't go back and get them, right? So they were gone. They weren't going to repurpose them. This was a getting rid of, sacrificing them, right? When they set out, a terror from God came over the cities around them, and they did not pursue Jacob's sons. So this terror from God protected them, so they were just able to travel and not have to kind of fight their way through or negotiate their way through, right? So Jacob and all who were with him came to Luz, that is Bethel, in the land of Canaan. And Jacob built an altar there and called the place El Bethel, because it was there that God had revealed himself to him when he was fleeing from his brother. Bethel is house of God. El Bethel is God, house of God, God's house of God. The emphasis, right? He called that place, he built the altar, gave it that name, right? Because that's where God had revealed himself. Again, Genesis 28. So he goes and does exactly what God tells him to. Jacob has changed, right? He's different than he was. Now, Deborah, the one who had nursed and raised Rebekah, died and was buried under the oak south of Bethel. So Jacob named it Allon Bakuth, which means this place of weeping. She had traveled with them this whole time and been obviously very close to their family, and so it was a sorrowful time when she passed there. God appeared. Now, at that point, they could think, well, this has now become a place of sorrow instead of a place of joy. But look, God appeared to Jacob again after he returned from Padam Aram, and he blessed him. God said to him, your name is Jacob. You will no longer be named Jacob, but your name will be Israel. So he named him Israel. God also said to him, I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation, indeed, an assembly of nations will come from you, and kings will descend from you. So your name is no longer Jacob. It's now Israel. That's where they get the nation's name, right? Isn't it interesting? You have Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Of those, you think the greatest of those is Abraham, right? But the people are not, they don't call the nation Abraham, they call the nation Israel after the new name that Jacob gets. Jacob was a trickster. Now these are God's people. This change that has happened, he's God's man here now, right? And they become the people of Israel, his descendants. So the Lord comes to him again. God says to him, right? The Lord appeared to him again and says to him, your name is Jacob. You're no longer Jacob, but now you're going to be called Israel. And let me tell you, often he's called Jacob in the rest of the Genesis. Don't get caught up in that, right? So he named him Israel, and he said, I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation, indeed, an assembly of nations will come from you, and kings will descend from you. Wow. What a promise to Jacob, right? The Lord is renewing this promise. He goes on to say here in this next part, I will give to you the land that I gave to Abraham and Isaac, and I will give the land to your future descendants. And then God withdrew from him at the place where he had spoken to him. Jacob set up a marker at the place where he had spoken to him, a stone marker. He poured a drink offering on it, poured oil on it. Jacob named the place where God had spoken to him Bethel. Okay, this part looks a whole lot like Genesis 28. What the Lord had said to him there. And it looks like Genesis 12. And I mean, you can just see this in the statement of the covenant that God makes over and over again. And he renews again this covenant agreement with Jacob, right? I'm going to give this land to you and to your future generations. This is a promise not just for you, it is for all of your descendants. And then God left and he sets up a marker, again, a stone marker. Okay, I want to just talk about two things here. One, there are times in our life when we need to, when we follow the Lord, but we need some, okay, am I going right? is this what you're telling me, Lord? And the Lord will reaffirm to us over and over again the call that he has on our lives, what he has told us to do. He reaffirms that. That's what he does here. The second thing is marking those times when God has spoken to you. This comes out of Experiencing God, and Henry Blackaby. I didn't make this up, but I love Experiencing God. If you've done it, then you know what a great study that is. If you haven't done it, you need to. But he talks about looking at the markers in your life, going back in your life, make a list, write down on a piece of paper, in a devotional book, something, write down the times in your life when you know God spoke to you, when you know God worked in your life and what it was, right? And what you'll find is that while those things may have appeared random at the time, they may have appeared just out of nowhere, the truth is they lined up and they showed you the work of God and the pathway that God has been leading you on all this time. For God's call is never random, right? And God is saying to Jacob, I didn't just put you in a random place. This is the land that I promised to your grandfather. And I promised to your father, and now I'm promising to you, and I'm promising to all the generations after you. This is how I'm going to show myself to the world. It is through your descendants, Israel. This is a powerful thing in Jacob's life for sure, and it also would be powerful in our own lives if we were to go back and look. If you go back and look, and this can be a great moment of discipleship within your class, is just let them in class start a list of the times that they've known God has worked in their lives, and urge them to take time during the week to add to that list and see if they can't see God's hand moving in a consistent direction through their lives. Okay, thanks for watching. God bless you. Appreciate you teaching. And those of you just watching, God bless you, man. Subscribe, like, comment, share it with somebody else. Tell me where you're watching from. We'll see you next time.